So we're up to our last topic, topic 14. So what we're doing this topic is having a look at the nutritional needs in the later stages of life. So last time we looked mainly about nutritional needs during pregnancy and a little bit during the toddler years, and now we're going to have a quick look at how the nutritional needs change during our life cycle from child right through to the elderly. So again, we've got some questions we need to think about. So these are areas that we need to focus on. So in terms of growth requirements during adolescence, so there's going to be a growth spurt there. It's going to affect, as in your teenage years, you're putting on a lot of muscle mass and also bone mass. So there's obviously nutritional needs associated with putting on muscle in terms of protein and iron for the blood supply, and also with the calcium for the bones. Next one there. Oh yeah, there's a growing trend of childhood obesity. Something like a third of all children in Australia are either overweight or obese, and it's leading to a number of chronic problems that normally occur in later years, but is now occurring in the childhood years. So things like diabetes, and even in some cases heart disease. So we'll have a look at the link between nutrition and some of those problems with obesity. Yeah, and besides type 2 diabetes and heart disease, which is associated with obesity, there's a whole range of different health problems that can occur, and we'll have a quick look at those. Then we're going to do a bit of focus on what happens in the elderly. And we were talking about people past the age of 65, how those nutritional needs change, particularly both the macronutrients and micronutrients. And in the elderly there is problems with malnutrition. We'll have a look at that as well. Yep, so these are the areas we're focusing on this week, from nutritional needs of children, adolescents, adults, and then the elderly. So firstly, I wanted to show you what's actually happening. So this is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So they've produced information about the various age groups, from toddlers down the bottom here right through to the elderly. And they've got a chart here for males, and then there's a second chart in the next slide for females. Both have similar information that whether the children are males, as they're eating very energy-dense food, particularly high in sugar, particularly high in fat, and at the same time they're not getting nutrient-dense food, so they're not getting enough fruits, vegetables, and not fibre. With the adult population, there's excessive consumption of alcohol, again, not enough fruit, and then in the older adults, seems to be a trend there with, again, too much alcohol, and then again, very energy-dense food. So that's occurring for both males, and we'll look at the next slide and see there's a similar pattern for females as well. So it's basically telling us there are nutritional problems, and some of these nutritional problems are leading to some of those chronic problems. Right, so the first group we're looking at is nutritional needs during childhood. So we're defining childhood, preschools between 2 and 5, and then school children between 6 and 11. During the toddler years, there was a very quick growth spurt, so there's a lot of energy required there. During preschool, at school age, the growth is happening, but slower, and so we don't need as much energy. So this is talking about a decrease in appetite. We can measure the growth requirements and nutritional requirements by looking at the body mass index for the appropriate age group. And we're simply checking to see if they are of the correct weight, and they're not becoming overweight or underweight. So we've used the BMI charts before. So now we've got specific BMI charts specifically for children. So what we're doing is just comparing the child's BMI to the population average and seeing that they're within the normal weight range. Okay, I showed you the statistics from Australian Bureau of Statistics, and there's obviously a problem there that children are selecting very energy-dense foods, particularly high in sugar and high in fat. And the recommendation is that the children should be consuming nutrient-dense foods. They've got fairly small stomachs, so they're recommending to have these nutrient-dense foods as snacks, both in the morning and afternoon. And here's a bit of a suggestion as to the range of foods that could be used as a nutritional dense food. So anything from crackers with peanut butter right through to vegetable sticks and hummus at the bottom there. Nutritional needs in terms of total calories. These are macronutrients. So again, we've seen something similar before. As the mass of the individual increases, so then the energy needs will then increase. And again, we can see that information we've seen previously that males tend to require more energy, particularly as they get older, as they've got a greater amount of lean muscle mass. And again, we can see the difference between individuals that are physically active versus individuals which are inactive. Obviously, the active individuals require a lot more energy per day. With children, particularly the preschool children, there's a number of potential eating problems. And here are some eating problems such as picky eaters and what they call these food jags. The children tend to not want to try new foods. So here are some ideas in terms of trying to promote healthy eating habits. So you're trying to avoid nagging the children, forcing them to eat particular foods, create an enjoyable environment. Don't panic if the children are missing a meal. Okay, so some of the potential problems, the potential nutritional problems that can occur are that the child might become iron deficient. So what we need to do is iron-rich foods, particularly red meat, but you can also go for foods that have been enriched or fortified, such as cereals. Some children are prone to constipation, so we need to take care that they're consuming sufficient amount of fibre and sufficient amount of fluid. The skeleton is developing in children, so we need to make sure that it's developing correctly and they're getting sufficient supply of calcium, so there's not going to be a problem of osteoporosis later in life. So remember when we looked at the toddlers, they're prone to allergies. As preschool kids, they're still prone to allergies, so the typical allergens we need to be aware of in the foods. And because the children tend to be consuming these energy-dense foods, often high in sugar, they could potentially be prone to dental problems. Okay, there is this growing trend of obesity and overweight in children. As I mentioned, the statistics say that in Western countries, about 30% of children are either overweight or obese. And it's leading to chronic problems such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and also hypertension. Now, sometimes it is related to genetics, but typically it's related to consuming these very energy-dense foods combined with a lack of physical activity. So one of the problems is very high energy dense foods as a result of peer pressure and advertising on TV, and also they're following bad habits of parents or brothers and sisters. So they found that things such as soft drinks, candy bars, potato chips, they tend to be sources of very energy dense foods which are causing problems. At the same time, children are not consuming the required amounts of fruits and vegetables. There is also a problem with portion size, again resulting in excess calories. So the obesity is occurring because we're getting too much energy in, not enough energy out. So there's insufficient energy out as a result of insufficient physical activity, too much screen time, lack of physical activity at school, lack of physical activity in daily life. So most of the children now get a lift to school, for example, in a car rather than walking or taking a bike to school. So you can see here the growing trend in childhood obesity. So this is happening in all Western countries, not just Australia. So you can see close to about 30% of children are currently either overweight or obese. So that's something like 1 in 4 children are either overweight or obese. Problem with obesity is, we've already mentioned the type 2 diabetes and the heart disease, hypertension, but there's also sorts of other problems that could occur as a result of being overweight or obese, including certain types of cancer. All right, so when you get a chance, if you could please have a look through this video on supersized children. Have a look at the current problems with obesity in children. So there's some of the problems in terms of consuming too much energy and not enough physical activity. So the health authorities have put together some recommendations to try to avoid childhood obesity. So we've got a list of suggested nutritional intakes and also suggestions in regards to physical activity, so meaning at least 60 minutes of physical activity per day, and eating foods such as the fruits and vegetables, foods that are nutrient dense rather than foods that are energy dense. Okay, next group we're looking at is the adolescents during the teenage years. So we're talking about the age group between 14 and 18. A lot of hormonal changes, big increase in the body size. So expecting up to 25% increase in height during the teenage years. Typically, females would grow 8 centimetres, boys would grow 10 centimetres, and the girls will put on 15 kilos, and the boys will put in 22 kilos in weight. So you can see the graphics there. In boys in particular, there's quite an increase in lean muscle mass. So during that growth spurt, there are recommendations in terms of their macronutrients. These are very similar to the recommendations for adults anyway. So 25 to 35% calories from fat, 45 to 65% calories from carbohydrates, around 0.85 grams protein per day, and 26 grams of fibre per day. So that's the macronutrients. Now the micronutrients, the ones that we need to focus on during the teenage years are things like calcium and vitamin D to make sure we get what they call the peak bone density. So during these teenage years is when your body puts on most of its skeleton. So that's when it's depositing most of the calcium into the skeleton. And if we don't do that during this peak time, you might be prone then to osteoporosis later in life. So the recommendation is you're consuming 1,300 micrograms of calcium per day. So besides calcium as a mineral and vitamin D, we also need to increase our intake of iron. So that's going up to 15 micrograms per day for females and 11 micrograms per day for males. So remember, this is the time that you're putting on tissue, putting on muscle. So we need to supply that with additional blood, and the blood in the hemoglobin needs iron. We also need some additional vitamin A as well. So here's showing our peak bone mass. So what I'm saying is half of all your bone is actually being deposited during your teenage years. So this is where we need increased supply of calcium, increased supply of vitamin D to actually form our skeleton for later in life. During teenage years, fairly active, so you might need to increase your fluid supply. So they're saying for boys, maybe 3.3 litres per day. For girls, about 2.3. Again, that's related to the body mass of males versus females. In terms of supplements, well, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, you probably won't need it, but it's if not, it's recommended that you might want to consider taking a multivitamin. Okay, in terms of healthy food choices, there is peer pressure during those teenage years to select fast foods rather than nutritional food. Parents often play a role. They act as role models in terms of the food choices. The recommendation is make sure you're getting enough of those fruits and vegetables and make sure you're getting whole grains. So things we need to be concerned about is are the teenagers getting enough physical activity to prevent obesity? We need to look out for any signs of anorexia and other eating disorders, as this is the age group in which those sort of problems can occur. And we also need to look out for other issues such as smoking, alcohol intake. Okay, next stage after the teenage years is when you become an adult. So we're talking about 18 years old and plus. So, between say 18 to about 40, not much happens. All your body is just simply maintaining its current composition. So you're just basically trying to maintain what you've got, and you do that by eating a good balanced diet and staying physically active. And by doing that, we can prevent the onset of various chronic diseases, so the type 2 diabetes, the heart problems, the hypertension. There shouldn't be a huge amount of growth during these middle years. Then eventually we get into the elder years, so we're then starting to talk about over the age of 65. Your body will start to age. So for humans, we're expecting a lifespan, maximum lifespan between 100 and 120. Typically in Australia, the average lifespan is 82 years, a bit higher for females at 84. And your life expectancy will be controlled by things such as nutrition, physical activity, and other lifestyle choices. Okay, theories in terms of what causes aging. So there's one hypothesis talks about programmed cell death. So they're saying that the cells have a certain lifespan and eventually they'll stop dividing and eventually the cells will die, and the person will die. The next theory is about wear and tear hypothesis, in that eventually the aging processes causes sufficient damage to cells that the cells again will die, organs will die, and then the individual will die. And then the third hypothesis in regards to that combination between genetics, environment, and lifestyle. So the aging is a result of that combination of person's genetics, the person's environment, and the person's lifestyle. So your genetics will help determine how efficient your cells are, and then your environment will influence how well your cells repair. Your lifestyle, including nutrition, will then also affect how well your cells will actually respond. So in that third hypothesis, they're saying that aging is going to be influenced by initially your own genetics, so what sort of genes you carry, what sort of environment you're in. Are you exposed to toxins? Are you in a high-risk environment, such as accidents? And your lifestyle in terms of your nutritional choices and the amount of physical activity that you might be doing. Okay, as we age and we get past age 65, there's a number of changes that occur in the body. So one of the big changes that happens is a reduction in lean muscle mass. So we can see here, middle years, amount of muscle is around that 25 to 30% muscle. Then once you get past 70, that's dropping down to less than 20% of your body mass is actually muscle. And at the same time, we get an increase in body fat. So the lean muscle is being replaced by body fat. You start to lose calcium, so you start to lose bone density. Things don't start to work as well. Remember, the cells are deteriorating, including your white blood cells, so your immune system is not working as well as it should be. Your digestive system is not working as it should be either. So your small intestines are not able to absorb nutrients as they once were. And as we get older, your sense of smell and taste is reduced. And so you might end up becoming dehydrated, or a person that simply doesn't become interested in food. You might then become malnourished. So typically, it's once we get past 65, you're less active, so your energy needs start to go down. Also, your basal metabolic rate is reduced because you've got less lean muscle mass. So again, your energy needs are going to be down. You're going to try to maintain as much muscle as you have. So you really want to maintain your protein levels. Fat metabolism doesn't change, so the consumption of fat shouldn't change. Your sense of thirst is reduced, your sense of taste is reduced, so dehydration can become a problem. And as we mentioned, there's a problem with your digestive system as we get older. So you're going to have problems absorbing nutrients, particularly the B vitamins, B12 in particular. So in terms of your macronutrients, remember you've got less lean muscle, less active, so you're going to need less energy overall. So less calories. The other, well, you're going to need less nutrients in total, but you're still going to need a combination of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And we can actually start to consume a little bit less fiber. In terms of the micronutrients, we're going to need more vitamin D and more calcium, because this is the time when potentially osteoporosis can occur. So we're starting to lose some calcium. So we want to try to maintain our skeleton as best we can. So we need to start increasing our vitamin D and our calcium levels. Also, as we get older, your body is not quite as good at converting sunlight into vitamin D. So again, there's a need to increase the amount of vitamin D intake. We're suggesting we don't need quite as much fibre because we're consuming less energy anyway. And vitamin B12 and vitamin B6 needs to be increased as a result of our digestive system not being able to absorb vitamins and minerals as well as it should. All right, so we mentioned calcium, vitamin D. Lean muscle mass is decreasing. Your body mass should be decreasing, so you need less iron. Your immune system is not working as well as it should, so you can try to improve your immune system by taking in a bit more zinc. And B vitamins, B6, B12, you need to start taking more of the B complex vitamins because we're not absorbing the vitamins as well as we used to. Fluid intake is same as for adults, but we need to take care that we're not becoming dehydrated because you're starting to lose your sense of taste and your sense of thirst. Now, they have developed specific dietary guidelines for the elderly to take into account requirements for calcium, requirements for vitamin D, requirements for zinc and so on. Okay, nutrition-related diseases. So if the person is overweight or obese, they're going to have potential problems with type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension. The elderly can also become underweight as a result of that lack of taste and lack of thirst sensation. They might be suffering other problems such as depression, isolation, which means they might not be consuming sufficient amounts of calories. The elderly are also more prone to osteoporosis as we start to lose bone density. Other problems with eyesight and certain medications might also interfere with nutritional uptake. There is an increase in malnutrition in the elderly, and it's due to a range of different factors. We've already mentioned the decline in your taste and smell. As you become elderly, they may have lost your teeth, so you're not consuming sufficient amount of food. We've mentioned the digestive system not working quite as well. Less mobile, so they might not be able to get to the shop to buy the appropriate foods. Decline in companionship and exercise, hormonal changes, development of various chronic diseases, particularly things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, hypertension. Could also be development of other problems such as Alzheimer's and dementia. And the last one there is the lack of income. So they might simply not have enough money to buy the appropriate foods. There's a good video up there on YouTube that talks about malnutrition in the elderly. So when you get a chance, if you could please have a look through that. And if you want to have a look at your own risk of chronic disease and to have to think about how long you might live, there's a website there, Better Health, Victorian Health Department, which goes through and provides information about increasing your life expectancy.